One of the biggest problems with job interviews, as with resumes or applications or all that kind of thing, anything really to do with the hiring or job searching process, is that advice is extremely varied and often very contradictory, but the expectations are extremely specific and you get punished greatly if you fail to meet these expectations. And that's kind of the basis of why this whole thing is such a mess and it can be so difficult to get through. Even before you get into all the other nonsense involved with it, at a very basic level, there's the question of what the heck are you supposed to do? And people who hear some of this will probably go, well, Arjun, of course you shouldn't have done that, or that's not my experience, etc. And that's kind of my point, to a large extent, is very many times in my job searches over the years, I've come up with completely contradictory information. People will give me totally different advice. And the advice is often like not even like a recommendation. It's like, you have to do this. If you don't do this, it's going to be a complete and utter disaster. Or if you do this, it's going to be a complete and utter disaster. So, like, before we get into this in a bit more depth, let me give a couple examples. One job interview I went to, I wore a red shirt, and afterwards, I forget I forget if it was a family friend or some career consultant is like, you wore that. You're lucky they didn't like physically assault you for that. That is a sign of aggression, and that's a sign that you're going to be a bad employee or something like that. It was like a burgundy colored shirt, and they're like, the reason they were rude to you during that interview was because of the color of your shirt. So it's just like, what? So that was one case. Another case off the top of my head, and this is one I'm still kind of irritated about, is so one time when I was working a paid internship, and I had a job interview. Now the job interview was in another city, so I had to drive. I had to drive to the other city. I had to take a day off of work. I was an intern, so I was a contract worker, so I didn't get paid for the day, which is a substantial amount of money, plus having to buy gas and drive there. So when I got there and I went in, I sat down, the hiring manager took one look at my resume and said, "Oh, you're currently working as an intern in the public sector. We don't hire people with public sector experience. We think they're too lazy." And so I'm like, well, why am I even here? And that interview lasted approximately 5 minutes, and he told me to leave, and he said, "We won't call you. We won't call you. Don't expect us to call you." So that is just kind of like one example of what the process can be like. Because like in that case, okay, so they had a corporate policy against hiring people with public sector experience. So like the question you have here is, why was I even called in? That maybe the corporate policy is really just that individual hiring manager's policy, and HR didn't think there was the same problem. And that's part of the issue with a lot of these things is you get HR involved, you get outside recruiters involved, you get department heads involved, you get managers involved, sometimes there's hiring managers. There's all these different people all over the place who are involved, and they all have extremely different but extremely specific expectations. So, like, what are some other things, just before we kind of get into the length and breadth of the whole thing? Eye contact is one. Now, most people say you should make eye contact, but there's some people who say you should be serious and professional during an interview, and then other people say you should, like, you should be funny, you should be cracking jokes, you should show that you're at ease. And then other people are saying if you're rude and disrespectful, then it's not going to go well during an interview. And it's like you'll get these two different things. Like, you need to be calm and professional and confident, but then you also have to be goofy and funny and be a kind of guy that you can go have a beer with. And I get that some companies have different environments than others. Some companies have different cultures. But once again, that's not always that obvious. Their website may not tell you what the culture is. That particular manager or that particular department might be different from the rest of them. And so a lot of the time it's kind of like you just don't really know. Because something I've found over the years is whenever I kind of get depressed, I just apply to a whole bunch of jobs. And then sometimes I get interviews from companies I don't really care about. And oftentimes when I go and I talk to them, the actual job will be completely different from the posting. And the company will sound a lot better than they did on their website or in the ad or something. So like even doing your pre-research, even trying to figure out what the local culture of the company is and trying to tailor your interview to that is difficult. Actually, it's interesting on that subject because one time, because that's another thing they tell you, do your research, go look at their website, look at their public releases, that kind of thing, and then you can come up with that. And I looked at something a company had put on their website, and I'm like, oh, I saw this product that you released. That was pretty cool. And then they're like, no, that was actually something we put out just for public, just to make, like, to impress customers. It's not actually something we do normally. It's not related to our business. So it's like, in that case, it's like, okay, so you're supposed to go and look up the company, but the stuff they put on their website isn't what you're supposed to look at. But you're told to go to their website. And that's just kind of all like front end stuff. So my point is, if you're like somebody like me or just somebody in general, it's very difficult. It's like you don't really know what you're supposed to do. Like I remember one career class I was in, if they're like, if they want to ask you if you want to ask a question, if they ask you if you want to ask a question, say something crazy like, what kind of sandwich would you be if you were a sandwich? Or if this company was a flavor of soda, what flavor of soda would it be? And I'm like, did you really want to be asking that during an interview? I mean, I'm sure like some companies would like that, but I think a lot of them would just think you're crazy. And I get that there's this whole aspect of being able to, I don't know, read social cues or whatever. But once again, it's not even that obvious a lot of the time. It's very difficult, and you're in a position where the power dynamic is entirely in one direction. The other person holds power of life and death over you. You, generally speaking, unless it's an extremely specific position that you're like the only person can do, the other person holds all the leverage, all the cards, etc. So like, what are you going to do? Are you going to like strike out at them? Are you going to try to make like a joke with them? I think the response a lot of people have is to try to be respectful and kind of cautious, because that's just kind of the way the power dynamic works. So kind of another aspect of it that's really obnoxious is the kind of questions that they ask during interviews. Basically, all interviews ask very similar questions. What is your greatest weakness? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell me about yourself, that kind of thing. And there are like answer guides for this kind of thing, but once again, it's not really that clear cut. Like, tell me about yourself, I've seen all kinds of different answers for, ranging from give a brief summary of your background to tell me why you're perfect for this job to tell them something about your personal interests or your personal life, otherwise they'll think you're boring. And there might be cases where this is generally speaking just talking about your experience related to the job, but not always. And if you get it wrong, you're probably just not going to even be considered for the position. And it's just kind of a dumb question. I mean, like, I don't think it should be a game. Maybe that's just kind of an issue with me. I don't think this whole thing should be a cat and mouse game. It should just be like, okay, tell me about what past experience you have that would make you qualified for this job. Okay, then I can just list it. Like, we don't have to play like these, like, tell me what type of ham sandwich you are. Like, it's a waste of my time. I guess it's not a waste of your time, but it's just like, it's something I hate. It's like when you're trying to buy something and like they're out of stock, or the checkout's really difficult to use, or this their payment system's down. You're like, look, I just want to give you my money. I just want to buy this. Like in this case, I just want to have the job interview. I just want to explain my qualifications, explain why I think I'll be good at this job, and then you can give me the job or not. If I meet your qualifications, if you think I'm a good guy, okay, then hire me or just let me go. Don't do this like tell me about yourself. Don't do this. Where do you see yourself in 5 years thing? Like that's another one I really hate. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because like there's some people like, oh, you have to be like, oh, I'd be running this company in 5 years, or I'll be at another company. And I think though, like there's a lot of different views I've heard on that. I think what it's supposed to be is I'll be at this company in 5 years, and I'll be an expert at my position, or I'll have moved up. But it's like no one even knows oftentimes, particularly if you're a millennial. Like let's say you're applying for like a 3-month contract, and they're like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, you're not even offering me a 5-year term. You're not even offering me a year term. And you're supposed to know that. And it's once again, it's just playing games. Like what do they want? Do they want you to say like, I want to be a leader in my field. I want to be in my career. Sometimes it's to try to see if you are going to be at the company for a long time. So like the expectation is they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you're supposed to say at this company. And it's once again, it's this game of like cat and mouse, and I hate it. Like just ask, do you think if you like this job, do you think you'll stay at this company for a while? And the person might lie or tell the truth, but you'll at least get a direct answer. The person won't be looking at you like you're a space mutant. Like, so you got that. Then you also have the what is your greatest weakness question. Like that's another one that. Okay, so the conventional wisdom for a long time was you make up a strength and then you say it was a weakness. So it's like, oh, I work too hard. Oh, I have too much attention to detail. Okay, so that's one way. Some people say, oh, you just have to be honest, and they'll appreciate your honesty because they don't want you to lie to them. And like, well, some of them do want you to lie to them. Like, if you're going to be honest, like sometimes I make mistakes, that kind of thing. My general approach to the greatest weakness question is to try to list something technical or something that can be solved. Maybe we're getting into advice at this point in time, but just to say something like, oh, I'm not that familiar with this software. I'm not familiar with this type of programming, but I'm sure I'll pick it up or I'll take some courses or something. Because, like, to me, that's something solvable, but it's not lying. It's not like something that's irrelevant. But once again, like, I remember watching someone on YouTube who said, "Oh, you can make something up and give a conventional answer, but then I know you're lying to me, and I won't hire you because you're lying to me. And I know that 99% of other people want you to lie to them." But if somebody, for some reason, doesn't know I'm that 1% who doesn't, then you're screwed. And I'm just like, it's just like the ego on a lot of these people. Like, it's once again, it's about ego. It's about playing the game. It's about trying to like do word games and that kind of thing. It's just something I don't really have a lot of tolerance or patience for. Like, I'm fine taking the loss. I'm fine them saying, look, you're not qualified for this position. Look, you don't have the skill set. Look, we don't think you're a good fit for this place. I don't think you'd fit in with our culture. Like, that's fine. That stuff happens. But when it comes down to like, oh, you wore the wrong color of shirt and it made them angry, or, oh, you're automatically disqualified because of this past experience, we just didn't bother to look at your resume. Like, and then once again, like let's talk about resumes for a second. There's so many different things about how to do a resume. Like, some people want it chronological, some people want it functional, some people want a hybrid, some people say make it like very straightforward, some people say add as much as you can, some people say make it colorful, other people say just keep it clear and straight and to the point. And you will get all these different opinions, and almost every person will say if you don't do it this way, you're screwed. And you'll say, well, some people have a proven record of success. Okay, but everyone has a proven record of success. Everyone can come up with some statistic to say 80% of people who did this got a job, yada, yada. And once again, I guess you could just say I'm socially awkward. I'm bad at reading social cues or that kind of thing. But once again, I invite you, just go online, read through a couple guides, read through a couple resume guides, and tell me if it's not that there's a lot of conflicting information and how you're supposed to know who you're supposed to believe. It's impossible, and there's no understanding, I find, of it among most companies. And only is there no understanding of it, but they don't even seem to be aware of it, and they won't make any adjustments or compromise for it, which makes things very difficult. And it's sad if people don't get a job or the hiring process doesn't go well, not because the person's unqualified or unpleasant or doesn't have the work ethic, but just because they don't know how to play the game, as it were. Anyways, I'm going to do a follow-up video where I talk about how long the process can go on for, and all the hoops they make you jump through, and how they never get back to you. But that's all for now. This is Argent. We must